You may be aware of Jesus' warning to beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves. But you may not know what this word ravenous really entails. That's what we're going to focus on today. But it's amazing to me how many people completely disobey Jesus' command here. This is not a suggestion. This is a commandment of our Lord Jesus to beware of false prophets. This isn't optional, but it's amazing how so many Christians don't put in the legwork, don't put in the footwork to identify false prophets. They're just so easily deceived. But no, Jesus tells us this is something that we have to do. And he tells us how to identify them. It's by their bad fruit. He says, therefore, by their fruits, you will know them. What a lot of people do is they insert fruits that they think are bad and how to identify false prophets. And they say, look, it's by this particular fruit. This is how we identify a false prophet. And then some people over here will go, well, no, it's by this particular bad fruit that we identify false prophets. But what I want to focus on here is this word ravenous. This word ravenous, this is used 5 times in the Greek, and it's this word harpax. 4 out of 5 of the times this is used, it's translated as extortioners. So we see here in Luke 18:11, when the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners. That's this word harpax. That's in Matthew 7. In 1 Corinthians 5, when Paul is talking about how we shouldn't even keep company with those who claim to be brothers and yet are extortioners, it's this word harpax, as in Matthew 7 for ravenous. And we see in 1 Corinthians 6, he says extortioners, this word harpax, will not inherit the kingdom of God. So out of the 5 times this is used in the New Testament, 4 of these times it's translated as extortioners. Matthew 7 is the only time that it's translated as ravenous. So this gives us an idea of what this word ravenous really means. Again, 4 times it means extortioners. Now, another word that's closely related to this is harpage. And in Matthew 23:25, we see that Jesus was talking about the Pharisees and how on the outside of the dish, they cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of extortion and self-indulgence. It's this word harpage that's related to harpax. And in Luke 11:39, again, he says that they're full of ravening. Okay, here's this word similar to ravenous and wickedness. Notice back up here in Matthew 7, he said, inwardly, they are ravenous wolves. That's very similar to what he said down here, that they clean the outside of the cup and platter, but your inward part is full of ravening and wickedness. So this gives us an idea of what this word ravenous entails. It's translated as extortioner. Well, so how do people extort people? How do these false prophets extort the sheep and prey on them? Well, they do so predominantly through the tithe, through beating people over the head, pulling up an Old Testament law, an Old Covenant law, and telling them that they have to do this. Now, a lot of them, some of them will just straight up say, you need to do this or you'll go to hell. But a lot of them are more crafty than that. They don't quite put it like that, but they still extort money out of you using the tithe by saying things like, well, if you're truly a Christian, then you would tithe. So insinuating that if you're not tithing, then you're going to go to hell. That even though they won't outright say it, or they'll say things like, well, if you're serious about God, then you would do this, or something like that. It's a form of extortion. That's what false teachers do. They use the tithe to extort money out of people, and in so doing, they prove to be ravenous wolves, extortioner wolves. Let's just look up this word extortion in the English dictionary or the Cambridge dictionary. Extortion means the act of getting something, especially money, by force or threats. And in law, it's a crime of obtaining money or some other thing of value by the abuse of one's office or authority. So that's what these pastors are doing. They're abusing their office to extract money out of the sheep. They're fleecing the flock by beating them over the head with an old covenant law and telling them they have to do this or they should be doing this. And they're using their office of power to threaten you with hell or judgment of God if you don't do this. Even though, again, this is not found in the New Testament. Nowhere in the New Testament are you commanded to tithe. Paul doesn't talk about this. The apostles don't talk about this. This is not found in the New Testament or under the New Covenant. This is an old covenant practice. In fact, what we see is Paul says that he did not want to abuse his authority in the gospel. See, right up here, extortion is related to law. It's the crime of obtaining money or some other thing of value by the abuse of one's office or authority. Well, Paul said that he preached the gospel without charge. Why? That I may not abuse my authority in the gospel. You see, that he may not extort the flock out of their money. Do you see? That's why he preached the gospel free of charge. He didn't beat people over the head with tithing. In fact, he said something very different. In 2 Corinthians 9, 7 through 9, he said, "So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity." See, Paul didn't go around preaching that you had to do this. You needed to do this or you're going to go to hell. You had to give him money so that he can pay for staff salary, pastor salary, buildings, lights, worship service, all these different things that we have today that aren't found in the Bible. He didn't command people give him money for that. No, in fact, when he asked for money, it was either for food and doing mission work so that he could, survive, or it was for money for other people, for the poor, for other saints who needed it, or people who were undergoing a famine, something of that sort. So what extortioners do, or false prophets, they use the tithe to extort your money, to take your money from you and fleece the flock. But Paul says, for God loves a cheerful giver. And look at the context of this. Paul is talking about, when he's talking about giving of not grudgingly or of necessity, he's not talking about giving to a church building. He's talking about giving to the poor. Look down here. He quotes, "As it is written, he has dispersed abroad. He has given to the," what, church buildings? To the paid pastor and staff? No, he says, he has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Let's look up this word ravenous in the English dictionary. This will kind of give us an idea, a better idea of what this word means. In Merriam-Webster, it says ravenous means rapacious. We're going to go over that here in just a second. It means very eager or greedy for food, satisfaction, or gratification. A synonym of ravenous is this word rapacious. And it says right here some common synonyms of ravenous are gluttonous, rapacious, and voracious. While all these words mean excessively greedy, okay, that's the underlying meaning behind these words, excessively greedy. Do you see that? That's how this word can be translated as extortioner. So it means excessively greedy. Although all these words mean that, ravenous implies excessive hunger and suggests violent or grasping methods of dealing with food or whatever satisfies an appetite, including an appetite for money. That's what the picture that Jesus is trying to paint in Matthew 7 is. He's trying to paint these ravenous wolves who will fleece the flock, who will harm the flock. And how do they harm the flock? They extort money from them, and they kill and eat them. That's an illustration. That's an illustration of how pastors today are feeding off the flock, yes, to get fat and to get rich, to fatten themselves up, but also in the process of doing so, they're destroying the flock. How do they do so? Well, they're preaching an easy message. They're preaching false doctrine, like the tithe, but also other things like eternal security, faith alone. They're preaching words that sound good, to those who have itching ears. And this is how they do it. And in the meantime, they're destroying their souls. That's the picture that we're supposed to be seeing here. This word rapacious, it's a synonym of ravenous. It means excessively grasping or covetous, living on prey. You see, a wolf eats a sheep. A sheep is defenseless, and that's what these pastors are doing. they are living on prey. They're predators. That's what they are. These ones who demand a tithe, they're predators. That's what they're doing. That's how they need to be viewed. Okay. A predator is defined as an animal that naturally preys on others, a person who ruthlessly exploits others. Okay, we're going to get to this word here in just a minute, but exploit. What does exploit mean? It means to make productive use of or utilize, to make use of meanly or unfairly for one's own advantage. That's what these pastors who are beating you over the head with tithing are doing. We should be able to see this, and Peter tells us to watch out for these false teachers. In his passage, 2 Peter chapter 2, he goes through a long list of what false teachers are going to look like. So we need to open our eyes and see what Peter is saying. This is how we're going to identify. Remember, Jesus said we're going to identify them by their fruits, right? And then he says that they're ravenous wolves. This word ravenous means extortioner. So they're going to be extortioners, and we're going to know them by their fruits. Well, look how similarly Peter phrases this and tells us to likewise beware of false teachers. He says, by covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time, their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. See, they're going to exploit you. Now, we recently, today, we decided to go to church. We went to this church that we sometimes go to, and for some reason, our children didn't want to go in the children's ministry. They wanted to stay with us in the main building. So we said, okay, yeah. They stayed with us, and the time came around to hand around the buckets to take up collections. And my little girl said, "Hey, Daddy, that's what they hand around at our service in the children's ministry." And I said, "Wait, what? They hand these around at the children's ministry?" And she said, "Yeah, they do that at the children's ministry." And I was like, I couldn't. I said, "Wait, what?" I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. And she said, "Yeah, the kids will put money in these buckets that they pass around." And she told me that she put 50 cents one time. One time in the past that we were there, she put 50 cents of her own money in there. And I thought, wait. So they're asking kids to tithe, or at least give some of their money to the church. I thought, wait a minute. And so I decided to write one of the pastors that does the kids ministry. And I said, what does that money, my little girl told me that you guys are passing around buckets to collect money. Where does that money go to? Does that go to the general fund, or where does that go to? And he wrote back like there was no problem with it. He just said, yeah, it goes to the general fund to offset the costs of the kids ministry. Now, if you guys know anything about the general fund in most churches, many churches, it goes to pay the pastor's salaries. Think about that. That's the predominant expenditure of the average church in America, is pastor salaries. It makes up sometimes up to 2/3 of the budget of the general fund. Another big expense is the church building. And this makes up, it can make up to 1/3, depending on, of course, their expenditures, but it makes up a sizable portion. So salary and the building make up the majority of the funds in the general fund. So when he told me this, it clicked. Wait, what they're doing is they're extorting these little children. I'm talking, K through 5. They're asking them to put money in this bucket that they pass around that goes to pay their own salaries. Now just think about that for a minute, guys. Think about that. This is absolutely repulsive and disgusting. And I mean, if you can't see that, you need to open up your eyes. Think about it. Think about what they're doing. They're exploiting little kids and having them put their, whatever it is, their lunch money, their birthday money, whatever it may be, to pay them, to pay their salaries. Think about that. If that's not a wolf, a predator exploiting little children, then I don't know what is. I mean, think about it. Think about what they're doing. They're having kids pay their salaries with their own birthday money or whatever it may be. Guys, that's absolutely sick. And the scary thing is he responded back. He didn't even try to cover it up. He was like, yeah, it just goes to the general fund and, to offset the cost of the kids' ministry. And yeah, all right, thanks. And he didn't seem to see anything wrong with that, which blows my mind, taking money from kids that you're supposed to be shepherding. And you're taking money from them to support your own salary. Like just think about that. You're having the kids pay for your own salary. Guys, these are absolute wolves. These are wolves. And that's exactly what Peter says they're going to do. They're going to exploit you. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words, like the tithe or any other feel-good doctrine like eternal security, faith alone. But this word exploit, it actually means to make merchandise. So that's what Peter's essentially saying. They're going to make merchandise of you. Okay, they're going to do things. They're going to try to maybe sell books to you, sell the gospel in some way. They're going to push the tithe. They're going to come up with all sorts of clever ways to merchandise, to make merchandise of you. This is the mark of a false teacher, guys. We need to wake up and take this seriously. This is the bad fruit that we need to be looking out for. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words. And here's some more fruit. 2 Peter 2:14-15. He says, having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin. So they're going to say things like, well, we're all sinners. We're all going to sin to the day we die, and sin in thought, word, and deed, and all that. That's what false teachers are going to say. And what do? They're enticing unstable souls. They have a heart trained in covetous practices. Do you see the theme here? Covetousness, extortioners. These are ravenous wolves and are accursed children, the Bible calls them. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of righteousness. So they're gonna exploit you by making merchandise of you, and with deceptive words like they're everybody's sinners and it's eternal security or faith alone or whatever damnable heresy it is. They're gonna use these to draw you in and fleece the flock and destroy your souls by covetousness. So we need to be looking out for this. And right up here, it was talking about how rapacious and ravenous. It has this idea of eager or greedy for food, satisfaction, or gratification. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of down here in 1 John 2, where John says, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh. See, these men say they cannot cease from sin. They have eyes full of adultery. They have adulterous eyes. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. If you notice something, right here it says the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. This is the idea behind extortioner or ravenous. See, they're greedy for one of these things. They can't get enough of this. They're covetous for these things. And if you notice this, a lot of this is what Jesus came against the Pharisees for. Matthew 23. If you just go through Matthew 23, tell me that does not describe your average American church, especially megachurch pastor today. I mean, almost everything in Matthew 23, what Jesus rebukes them for, are things that most pastors are doing today. They love to take the seats of honor, right? They usually sit down right in front. They love to be greeted in the marketplaces as pastor, right? Just like Jesus said, the Pharisees loved to be greeted in the marketplaces, rabbi, which was essentially the pastor of their day. They love to do things like pray in public, make long prayers. This is all just repeating itself. Guys, things haven't changed. The religious establishment of that day is really no different than the religious establishment of today. Like Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just being repackaged in a different format. Do you see that, guys? Do you see? Go through Matthew 23 and tell me, are pastors today checking off the list? As you go through there, are they doing these things? Remember, Jesus said up here, remember, that inside they were full of extortion and self-indulgence. But they appeared on the outside as righteous. They looked like a sheep. You might look at them and say, yeah, that's a sheep. What's the problem? Why are you being so hard on these pastors? Why are you wanting to come against them and create such a big fuss and cause division and all this? Look, it's a sheep. Can't you see? But inside, see, they appear that way on the outside, but inside, they're hypocrites. It says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. And inside, they were full of extortion and self-indulgence. Remember, right up here. This is what we're supposed to be looking out for, guys. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly, they're ravenous wolves. They're extortioners. They're extortioner wolves, and they will devour you. Think about it. Go through Matthew 23 and tell me if that doesn't describe your average pastor today. Guys, we need to be on the lookout for this. We need to take Jesus' commandment here and apply it to our lives. We need to be diligent to study and show ourselves approved. We need to be diligent to learn what a false prophet actually does, what he looks like, how he acts. Study 2 Peter 2. That's one of the biggest passages on false prophets. Study the words of Jesus and learn who he was constantly coming against. Was he coming against those who were preaching obedience to God and actually not being hypocrites and actually being obedient? Or was he coming against those who were hypocrites and those of the religious elite of his day? Think about it. Remember, Jesus said, those who were first will be last, and those who are last will be first. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted, but whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Remember that? This is spoken about several times in the New Testament. Well, think about it. What he's saying is those who you would consider by worldly standards to be successful, to be rich, to be intelligent, to be the elite, these are considered first. And he said that the first will be last. Do you see that? So think about it. Think about all the pastors you know that seem very intelligent, that are propped up, that everybody loves. Remember, Jesus said that, woe to you if everybody speaks well of you, for so did they, the false prophets, right? So think about it. Think about all those in the Christian community who were held up on this pedestal and seen as godly men. On the outside, they appear as sheep. They appear as righteous, right? All these people are considered first. They're the elites. They're, by worldly standards, they have the money, they have the power, they have the fame, just like in the day of Jesus, right? Just like in the days of Jesus, the Pharisees had all the money, the power, they controlled the religious system of that day. So think about it. Think about it. Do you really think that 2,000 years later, all of a sudden, things are completely different and nothing is the way it was back 2,000 years ago? Or do you think it's at least as bad? Like Paul said, things are going to get worse. The time is coming when people will not put up a sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will turn aside to fables and amass for themselves false teachers. That's what we're seeing today. So it's going to be even worse, right? That's what Paul was warning about in Acts 20. So if you think about it, the religious elite today, they are considered first. They're the most prominent, they're the smartest, they're the most powerful. They're going to be last. Do you see that? Do you see that? They're going to be considered last. And it doesn't mean they're going to heaven. Just because that word last there, it's not talking about those who are going to heaven. Remember, he says, whoever humbles himself will be exalted. You can't tell me that he who doesn't humble himself, oh, well, he's still going to get to go to heaven. He's just going to lose out on rewards. No, read through the parables. Friends, read through the parables. Do you get the sense that the one who hid his minas, the servant, the Christian who hid his minas and talents, he was cut to pieces. He didn't go to heaven. He didn't just lose out on rewards. No, the unfaithful servant is not going to be told, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of your master. No, he's going to be told, depart from me. I never knew you. Listen, that's what's going to sadly happen to most of those who are considered popular, who are considered to be the top, the most godly men by most standards. These people are going to be, inwardly, they're going to be extortioners. They're going to be full of extortion and greed and wickedness on the inside. These are the people who are going to be last. But on the other hand, you have the people who were last today, like Paul, for example. The people who were last today, who were not noteworthy, so to speak. They don't have a lot of riches. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of power, political power, or power within the religious system, just like Paul. Paul didn't have all this power within the religious system. He did at one point, back when he was a Pharisee, but he said he counted all this as rubbish. It was counted as trash when compared to knowing Christ. See, everything is going to be flipped at the judgment. So whoever's popular and famous now and considered by the masses of Christians to be great men, it's going to be flipped. The people who are first now are going to be last. But people who were last, like Paul was, he didn't, and like Jesus, he didn't have a place to lay his head, right? Paul said they were the scum of the earth, the trash of the earth. They were not going around and people just propping them up, and they didn't have all these mansions and big houses and huge church buildings and all this stuff. No, they were last. That's the idea. They made themselves last here on this earth. They avoided the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, all this in order to be first at the judgment. Do you see how things are going to be flipped? He said many. Now, not everybody, but many who are first now will be last. Many. So just think about that, guys. Think about it. Don't just assume that just because somebody looks to be a sheep and seems to be preaching godliness or whatever, at least some form of godliness, that they're automatically a sheep. No, we have to look at this. Okay, what is one of the marks, according to all the verses that I laid out? What is one of the main marks of a false prophet? Well, they have wicked fruit, they have bad fruit, and what does this include? This includes covetousness. This includes the fact that they will extort you. They will, in their covetousness, make merchandise of you. We see this from the Old Testament to the New. This is how the false prophets operate. They're always trying to exploit you to get your money. Don't fall for it. Now you know to look out for it. Now you know when Jesus is talking about ravenous wolves, this word 4 other times is translated as extortioner. Extortioner means to get money from somebody by use of threats, by threatening them with something. Hey, if you don't give me your money, X is going to happen, right? Look out for this, guys. Don't be deceived. Please go ahead and comment down below if you have any thoughts, concerns, questions. That's all I got for today. God bless.